morning, everyone. Can you all hear me? Yeah. Okay. Oh, it's so weird to hear your own voice. I'm Taylor Roden. Welcome to our program today. Thank you for being with us on this very sunny Saturday. I'm the Community Events Manager at Historic Seattle, and I'm sure most of you got an email from me, so thank you for reading the email. I have a few things to say, and then I'll turn it over to our wonderful team, Mike, John, and Deb. So first I want to say what we do. What is Historic Seattle? So our mission is saving meaningful places to foster lively communities. And we start each program by reading a land acknowledgement that our staff and board and council put together. So I'll read that to you all. And then I'll thank a bunch of people. And then I have a few more things to say. So Historic Seattle knows that our properties and programs occupy the unceded traditional territories of the Coast Salish peoples. And this land acknowledgement is not a substitute for developing relationships with Indigenous communities or for honoring Indigenous stories as we share in our collective history, but it's our first step in recognizing the people whose land we occupy. Before we dive into the program, I definitely want to thank some of our sponsors. So thank you to Bricklayers and Allied Craft Workers, Local 1, Washington and Alaska, Selland Community Foundation, Urban Villages in Railspur, and Daniels Real Estate, The Greystone, and Gridiron. I also want to thank Eugenia, my Historic Seattle colleague, Eugenia, who's going to be snapping photos for being here today and really helping me make this possible. Definitely want to thank Save Stone Cottage crew. Yes, John, Mike, Deb. Yes, you're the reason that we are here today. And just a couple of notes. So it's really wonderful that you all are here. As of Wednesday, 20 of you registered. So we planned for a small group, and then over the past couple of days, our group doubled. So we have 20-ish chairs and 40-ish people, and that's great. So shout out to you all for coming. But I do want to say that because we were planning for 20 folks, I know that I'm just acknowledging the reality of us not being enough chairs. So if you're able to stand for the program, that'd be great. And if you need to sit and there's an available seat, I would encourage you to do that as well. I'll let you all take care of yourselves, but did want to note that we did our best, and then you all showed up at the last minute, which is amazing. But we're outside, so it was a little hard to get more chairs at the last minute. The other note that I just want to acknowledge is that when we planned this event back in January, we were operating under different COVID guidelines, and so I know that the mask mandate has changed a bit. We decided to stick with what we said in the beginning, which is if you're not eating or drinking, we ask you to wear a mask. Obviously, we're outside and things have changed, so there's that. I'll leave it there. I think that's all that I have, so I'll turn it over to John. Are you next? All right. Thanks, everyone. You're a little taller than I am. Just a bit.
That'll work. Thank you for coming, and thanks. And thanks to Mike Shaughnessy for doing all the microphone tech. Okay, we'll just do it this way. So thanks for Historic Seattle for acknowledging this project right down their alley for sure. I'm just going to give a little bit of history of the Stone Cottage before my partners take over here. But if you really want to know everything about it, you can go to our website and you can go down some pretty deep rabbit holes of the history of this place, because it's not the woman Eva Falk that owned it was, well, let's say unique, different. Anyway, so the house was built in the 20s by Eva Falk, and she wanted the exterior to be stones or rocks like we're on the beach right across the street from us. This house originally sat down on Harbor Avenue across from the boat launch there. So she got her children to take wagons down to the beach and collect the rocks, which went well, except that she also needed somebody to put the rocks on the side of the house. So she went over to Hooverville across the bay and got some unemployed people over there, and they came over and set the rocks up. So her kids grabbed the rocks and they installed them on the side of the building. Well, one of my favorite stories that our past president of the Southwest Seattle Historical Society, Marilee Hagan, always talked about was that if you know anything about masonry, mortar has lime in it. It's different from concrete. You can't just mix, go down to the beach, get some sand and put some cement in it and make concrete. It has to be workable. So she didn't know anything about this. She didn't know anything about lime. So she figured out that cream of tartar could be put in with the sand and the cement and make it workable. So they covered the whole side of the house with rocks. And the rocks mean a lot to the Duwamish tribe, because the Duwamish feel that their ancestors that have passed are in the rocks and the trees and the soil. So it's got the Duwamish. The history of this starts with the Duwamish tribe, and it goes all the way through various stages where it also talks about the history of Alki now, which is all these small houses are getting torn down and condos are being built. So we felt lucky that we were able to save this. And how this came into focus for us was 20 years ago. I'm going to say it, Clay, too. So 20 years ago, Clay Eels, standing over there, one of our committee members, called me and said, hey, the family wants to sell this property. This was 20 years ago. Wants to sell this property, and they wanted to know if we'd be interested at the Southwest Seattle Historical Society of taking it. They would donate it to us because they're going to sell the property for development. So we met down there with Clay Eels, myself, Ken Bounds from the Parks Department, and Marilee Hagan, who was the president of the Historical Society at that point. And we looked it over, and Clay says, so John, what do you think? Do you think we can move this thing without falling apart? And then he made me crawl into the basement, which I did. And I kind of thought that, yeah, I think we could move it without it falling apart. My original idea was to possibly shrink wrap it all together so it wouldn't fall apart. But anyway, so we were gung-ho and excited, and then they decided that actually they weren't going to sell the property, which was probably smart, because 20 years ago what they could have gotten for the property and what they got for it 2 years ago, huge difference. But anyway, it had been in our sights for 20 years, and we knew we wanted it. And then I heard through a friend of Mike's that the property had sold, so we immediately went to the developer, who's Chengqi Development out of Taiwan, I believe, and really afraid what they were going to say, because most developers just say, get out of here. That's a waste of our time. We just need to get that thing down and start building. But they were really good. They said, okay, not only will we sell you the house for $1, but we will also give you $20,000 to help move it. So that was our first step, and then we fundraised. And next, Deb is going to talk about how we fundraised and what we did with that money.
Thank you, John.
You did, thank you. Let me just open everything up here. So we were totally thrilled to be receiving the Community Advocacy Award from Historic Seattle. My name is Deb Barker, and I'm a member of the Save the Stone Cottage LLC. You met John, and you'll hear from Mike after this. I'm the one who wanders around with pieces of paper hanging out all over the place. Because saving and moving this building has been a community effort, all the way through from 20 years ago, when it was a twinkle in some people's eyes, even though they were under a house, to 2 years ago when the building was sold. It's always been a twinkle in West Seattle's eye. We didn't even know why it twinkled at us, but we sure can see it now. Our crowdfunding endeavor raised $85,000 to move this cottage and save it from demolition, which actually, the demolition of the site started the day after this thing got moved. It was wild. Boy, those wrecking balls were just waiting at the door. So saving and actually moving a cottage does take a village. Let's get this out of the way. And it goes really well if you've got a wrecking ball staring you in the face and a countdown and a deadline. There's an amazing team of, we call ourselves the Stoners, that made the first mile move happen. I'm going to introduce some of them real quickly to you. We have John Bennett, who you heard earlier. He's a preservationist, a businessman. He's a landlord who nurtures and preserves a Seattle that is local, real, and practical. And he also sells really awesome milkshakes. Mike Shaughnessy, wave your hand. Mike is the gadget guy. He's a junkologist, collector of vintage technology, and he is a skateboard fanatic. I'm Deb Barker. I'm a closet preservationist, a fairly loud community activist, and I love to give my opinions. Kathy Blackwell, Kathy's not here yet. She's the president of the Southwest Seattle Historical Society, and she has been our voice of reason. We had on our team BJ Bullard, who is a documentary filmmaker.
Here comes Kathy.
Let's give her a hand. Hey, Kathy, welcome. Woo-hoo. Great timing. BJ Bullard, documentary filmmaker, communication scholar, and she is a change maker. She helped us get our first video going, which is just awesome when you see it. It'll take your breath away when you watch it on our website. There's Clay Eels, Seattle writer, journalist, and occasional devil's advocate. Jeff McCord, game designer, filmmaker, preservationist, and he was our house moving guru. There was Sherry Sewell, business development, executive support specialist, and an absolute lifesaver. So that was the team that worked on Save the Stone Cottage, where we would meet weekly and put together programs. You know, along the way, we were really grateful to have Eva Fox's daughters and their families look really favorably on this project. And actually, if you get around to driving around West Seattle today and you go by the old house site, if you look down in the basement, you can still see the daughters and actually the family members' handprints are in the concrete of the basement, which is still exposed. And that would be Carmesita Munoz and Yvonne Brehan. So let's give the family a big round of applause. You know, so the other night I went through our repository to see what the Save the Stone Cottage ride, what we shared with the West Seattle community to deserve this Community Advocacy Award. And oh my gosh, 2021 was quite a ride. Now in December 2020, we started our GoFundMe page and we kicked off. We got ourselves a financial sponsor, and we had an actual, in the middle of a pandemic, a live yet socially distanced press conference in front of this building. A month later, we started a series of cottage-themed contests that let winners claim story stones while we raised money and awareness to save the stone cottage from the wrecking ball. The first one was counting the stones, because Mike had actually counted all the stones on the cottage, and we knew how many were on the front, and we wanted someone to guess the answer. Well, Tanya Johnson guessed the closest to the answer, so she got the first story stone. A week later, we had a Stone Cottage clue-based Twitter search. Over 6 hours, we tweeted all of these clues, and Keith Leung solved all the clues, and he found a story stone at Alki's Whale Trail playground near where Carmesita and her sister had gone to school many years ago. I mean, West Seattle is just like that. In late January, on an absolutely gorgeous, cold Saturday, we did Walking in Eva's Shoes event, and that was from the Alki Lighthouse all the way to the Stone Cottage so that people could reenact the journey that the family took to get many of the stones that you see glued to the building behind me. Along the way, volunteers were sharing history, and Beata Stenger answered all the questions correctly to win a story stone. Our last event then was in mid-February. It was a live streamed karaoke rock concert. Get it? Rocks. Yeah. We've learned all the rock and stone jokes there are. So a karaoke rock concert. We had videos of local business owners and special guests performing rock songs or stone songs, and we had rock trivia too. And of course we had a winner who knew more rock trivia than any person should know. I mean, it was just crazy. They got all the answers right. That was in February. April, we had a virtual donor happy hour where we shared insights to moving the stone cottage. And we answered questions that people had, because people had been donating all this time. And what was their big question? When is it going to move? When is it going to move? And that was a question we kept asking. In early August, we got the answer to that question, when's it going to move? August 18th, and so we quickly put together a virtual auction with the highest bidders getting to participate in the moving convoy. Sorry, machine. And that was just a year. It seemed like it seems so long ago, and yet it was very, very busy. And the night of August 18th, this building started moving off its site where it had been sitting since the early 30s. By 1 a.m., it managed to get to the street, and by 5 a.m., that's 4 hours down the street here, it ended up parked in back of me and in front of you. It was a really tight fit over a fire hydrant, sliding by drooping wires, just to get to the street, and that took many hours. And then the hours of threading down Harbor Avenue past cars and trucks, and sometimes mere inches separating one of these beams from a vehicle or an insurance claim. Down the street, it pulled a couple hard lefts when it got to Florida Street into this parking lot, and you know what? Guess how many stones came off? 0. Whoever said 0. No stones were lost in this move. Yay. And kudos to Nickel Brothers Movers. So all along the way, the village of West Seattle, or the island, as we like to call it, because the bridge, yes, is still broken. The village of West Seattle has been with us in person, socially distanced, virtually on Zoom, at our websites, at our functions, in our hearts, at every rock and roll song that you think of, they've been there. And we thank Historic Seattle for giving us this award, because it's really for them that this award came about, and all the reasons that we're here today. Save the Stone Cottage, folks. Thank you so much.
Hi all. Well, thanks for coming, and thank you Historic Seattle for acknowledging and offering this award and little financial bonus on that one. Special thanks go out to the Southwest Seattle Historical Society, and Kathy Blackwell showed up now. She's the president of the Board of Trustees. Should I give a little plug that the Southwest Seattle Historical Society is currently in need of a new executive director? So we've just posted the application online. We had a wonderful director, Michael King, who came to us from the Heritage Museum, Paul Allen's Aviation Museum, and he did such a wonderful job over 2.5 years that he got noticed and he got hired away from us. So congratulations to him. He moved on to the Washington State Historical Association. Also, I noticed BJ Bullard showed up, and BJ is a famous documentary filmmaker and teacher, right? Antioch, is that right? Formerly just retired. BJ got excited about our project and made this wonderful 3-minute or so documentary film on the Stone Cottage, and if you get a chance, I know it's on Vimeo, it's probably on YouTube, and it's certainly linked from our website. So I was thinking last night, I've lived in West Seattle half my life, and we have, Seattle's a wonderful place. I love it, but it's extremely difficult to achieve what everyone here is interested in, and that's historic preservation. It's difficult for permitting. It's difficult. Every aspect of Seattle culture and politics is difficult to save structures. So, in thinking it through last night, thinking about what I would talk about, we have this really unique window of opportunity right now, and that is our generation right now currently. Seattle's not very old, so we don't have a lot of historic buildings to save, and at the current trajectory of the city is, it seems like they want to plow everything and build new, and it's moving forward and progressing towards higher density, and that's all great, but we need to save some of our history and our culture. And thanks to people like John Bennett, who's made a lifetime effort to save historic structures, we really don't have that many to save to begin with compared to other cities, and certainly East Coast, and then certainly Europe. But what few we have, we need to fight really hard to save. And we have maybe a 10 or 20 or 30 year window right now to save some of these, because in 40 years the structures that will be needed to be saved are going to be made out of LP siding and hardy board, and so the brick structures, the cedar, the old world construction, these are the ones we really need to fight for. And the city makes it difficult, but it's a marathon, it's not a sprint, and nothing is going to be easy. It's going to be hard. It's going to take a long time. It's going to take a lot of money. It's going to take a lot of political influence, a lot of interaction, a lot of communication. So the politicians come and go, elected officials, council members, commissioners, superintendents, they all come and go, but we will still be here. The Stone Cottage will still be here. We live here, so this place matters, right, Clay? So over the next, you heard about how the Stone Cottage, the history of the cottage, how it got here, the efforts that went into getting it to this point. That was phase one. Phase two will be, the next phase is planning and determining the final site location for it, planning a strategy that will be successful in infiltrating the city to convince them to do this. Our primary objective is to place it down on Alki Beach near the Statue of Liberty and the bathhouse, and that's Seattle Parks and Rec Department property. So we need to convince them. We need to get shoreline permitting. So there's a lot of obstacles. It's going to take a lot of time and a lot of money. So over the next year, hopefully we'll be calling on you guys to help. People want to volunteer if they have skills that they think that we could use. We're going to be forming new subcommittees to do, the planning and siting and permitting and everything needed there. And of course, financial support. We'll be kicking off a new GoFundMe campaign probably within 4 to 6 months that will fund phase 2 and 3 will be the planning, strategy, and placement. Phase 3 will be the placement, complete restoration. And what we would like to do, our goal, if we raise roughly about $300,000, that was last year's dollars, so next year's dollars it may be $400,000. But we raise that kind of money, we'll completely restore the structure, it'll be ADA compliant. We will donate it to the Parks Department if they place it down by Alki Beach, and we will give them say a 10-year operation and maintenance endowment, all for free, all publicly funded through this effort, and they will end up with, if you're familiar with the bathhouse and the Statue of Liberty, there's a small little chunk of grass in between the two, which is not really used. It's displaced. There's dumpsters there and a broken sidewalk, and our plan is to tie it into Liberty Plaza, which is the new remodel that has the nice benches and the brickwork, and tie that all together so architecturally it's attractive and contiguous with that. We think it will really enhance the property down there. So with that, those are our plans. Those are, right now we're in a resting period after having achieved this part of it. So we will be ramping up, and you'll be hearing more from us. There'll be more press, more email outreach, and so with that, we will, with caution, after this is over, after a little question and answer period, we will open this up if you'd like to go in and touch it. We just ask you to be very careful because there's exposed I-beams, and please don't go underneath it, and don't push hard on it. No, I'm kidding. So with that, I think we could open it up to question and answer. Oh, I see Jeff McCord also made it from the Stone Cottage Committee. Yeah.
You need to stand up because you missed your introduction. All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you have an idea what they will be used for once it's placed?
Did everyone hear that?
He's asking what it will be used for once it's placed, and that's a great question. In fact, that's the $1 million question to, I think, to make this successful with the Parks Department. When John and Clay 20 years ago, when they talked to the owners and wanted to save the structure, it was to save the structure. Nobody was thinking what it would be used for. When John convinced me, or I convinced him to let me help him save this, we had 3 objectives. It was to save the structure, to keep it in the neighborhood where it came from, and to allow it to be available to the public to enjoy for generations to come. So that's still our mission. What it will be used for, we had hoped that the Parks Department could help us decide that. So, for instance, a simple example would be the bathhouse down there currently has a pottery studio in it. Well, the bathhouse is an event space that's for rent, and Melinda here, who runs it, she needs to bring in chairs and tables every time they have an event because there's no storage space. So maybe the pottery studio could move into the cottage, which would be right next door, and it would give her space to put tables and chairs. Or maybe it's ran by the Alki Community Center, and they could have classes there. Or our hope was that Parks Department would see the need and that they would assign. We didn't want to assume that we could tell them what to use it for. So that's still in flux, and that's what we're working on.
But if somebody has an idea and needs to tell Parks their idea, that what it can be used for, help yourselves, go for it.
I think there's an element of this too, is to make sure that there's going to be some interpretive element so that the public, when they walk inside, can learn the story of this great building. We're all agreed on that.
Yeah. Everybody heard that?
Yeah.
Good.
You had a question back there? Yeah.
I'm wondering if it's safe where it is now, and if the Port of Seattle have given you a limit on how long it can be stored here.
I should have put a huge thank you out to the Port of Seattle early on with the other thank yous, because they've just been wonderful and so helpful. We pay by the year or by the month, so I mean there's no guarantees, but we were very clear that it would be here for 3 or 4 years. And this is somewhat displaced land, so there's we feel confident that we'll have 4 years. I mean, it's not like we can move it in my backyard tomorrow if we need to, you know. So yeah, Port of Seattle was very generous. We, you know, pay a small amount a month to store it here. It's behind 3 gates. It has daytime security staff here, so we feel really comfortable where it's at and that it can be here for a long time.
What's the floor like?
The floor, nobody's talked about the inside. Yeah, so the inside is equally as artsy as the outside. The Eva Falk, the owner of it, the builder, she was very eclectic and very artsy, very bohemian and ahead of her time. There's great stories about Eva Falk. She was a vegan, and she would walk around barefoot, and she was a member of a cult, and she married a strong man from a circus, and she was a beauty queen, and she posed naked in Lincoln Park for photographs, and she's a wonderful, cool lady. The inside is, the ceilings are all coved, but it was done by hand, so it's all very organic inside. The corners are coved. There's a wonderful hand-hewn cedar support wall that goes down the center, which was salvaged off of the beach and carved by her son. So it will need some restoration, but it's equally as charming inside.
Does it have a floor you can walk on?
The floor is a straight grain Doug fir floor. Most of it's original and not painted or anything, so it'll come back.
2 stained glass windows that are out of the building, but we've got them. And they were salvaged, because that's what they did. They found them supposed to go into somebody else's house. They never came to pick them up, so Eva got them and slapped them into the stone cottage. Beautiful pictures. Beautiful windows, rather.
Yep.
I was just curious, before it was covered in stone, did it have cedar siding on it, or what type, was it just
Right there.
wood?
Question is, before it was covered in stone, what was the exterior like? Yeah. You know, we say that it was in about 32, 33 is when it was clad in stone. But there are no solid records, but I suspect it was built in the early to mid 20s and was just a beach cabin thrown together out of, you know, whatever they could find, but it was just wood shiplap style, tongue and groove. I don't think anything fancy.
Plus, they probably had shingles on top of it because they don't.
Could be, yeah.
Say that louder.
Oh, I was just mentioning they probably had some sort of shingles on top of the lap siding, because usually there's an underlayment and then there's like shingles on top. So that's probably what it was at that point.
They took off before they put the stuff. They took the shingles off.
Sorry.
You were talking about the interior. Was it documented somehow before it was moved? Were the photographs taken and videos?
We have, the question is, was the interior documented? We have lots of photographs. We were fortunate to, Peter Nelson, who has sat on the Board of Trustees for the Southwest Seattle Historical Society, also works for the Museum of Flight. He came out with a fancy 3D, what's it called, Matterport 3D camera, and they did a complete Matterport walkthrough around the interior and the exterior. We've been kind of keeping those files on hand because, first of all, the camera went in after the shear walls were built, which were, before we moved the structure, there were interior shear walls built. but we do have interior and exterior completely documented in walkthrough video, fly-through format, which we will be posting, but we were just waiting for things to slow down here.
But it had also been.
the video that BJ did.
Is there oh yeah, there is interior shots
Yeah.
that BJ did. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's in the 3-minute video that we have.
A little bit. We also have, it had updates from the 70s. So, unfortunately, we had to get rid of the refrigerator, the stove, the plumbing, and things like that. So it was stripped down and then protected on the inside. You can see where the bolts go through, just to hold those interior walls. So it wasn't original to the 20s on the inside, but it was still very funny.
I just had, I think they're related questions. Like, are you gonna have to pour, are you gonna pour a slab for it? And are they gonna do any sort of seismic proofing just to make sure? I know a lot of older buildings, are not really able for earthquake.
That's a great question. Are we going to pour a slab, concrete slab, and do any seismic retrofitting for the structure? If we're fortunate to put it down on Alki Beach by the bathhouse and Statue of Liberty, our biggest concern there was rising sea level. And nobody wants to put the energy into saving a 100-year-old building to have it wash over in 50 years. So, yeah, that's all been taken into consideration, and it would be put on an elevated raised plinth concrete foundation. So it would be at least 18 inches off the ground with, able to withstand the king tides and what we've recently experienced this winter down there and the damage. So we're very aware of that. As far as seismic retrofitting, it doesn't technically need it because it's not a non-reinforced masonry structure, so it's merely rock over wood. Other questions? Yeah.
Is there anything we can do as a community to influence the park department?
Yes, absolutely. we learned, well, I'm new to historic preservation, so I had no idea it was this politically involved, but yes, anybody who has any tie into any department of any way to contact the Parks Department, every little bit helps.
Is there anything on your website that says who to send it to, or just to say we want to save it, or?
Well,
Not yet.
what we didn't really talk about here was there was a good year and a half of effort that went into convincing Parks Department to look at this as a proposal. And finally, after a year and a half of a lot of effort on all of our parts, we talked to the Board of Parks Commissioners, we talked to elected officials, we had meetings with the superintendent and his assistant. Everyone in the superintendent's office is aware of this project. We finally got headway, and their property acquisition manager gave a wonderful 45-minute PowerPoint presentation, and Parks had turned the corner and they were going to begin their due diligence and start the process of, should we put this here? And they have a whole process of due diligence. And just when we were making headway, the pandemic hit, and it just wiped out all of our efforts. And since then, several people have left. The superintendents left. The property acquisitions manager left. Both of our port commissioners who love this project didn't get reelected. So we will be putting together the new plan, which will be a new proposal. So when the time comes, we'll be putting out calls for help. But the short answer is yes. Every call to the Parks Department helps.
And there will be an opportunity, if we do get to schedule with the Parks Commission or other public meetings, to come out to those meetings, because the volume of people that support it will always help us to show that there is a lot of interest in supporting it.
Yep.
Yeah, you mentioned seismic issues. Are you concerned? It's going to be here like 3 or 4 years. In case we get a mild earthquake during that time, is there any danger of that collapsing?
So I can answer that question. I've actually worked for Nickel Brothers, and I can tell you that they are seismically safe when they're on cribbing. In some ways, it will shake a little bit, but they're as safe as on a crawl space or a foundation. So yes, they can withstand minor earthquakes. Of course, if we had the big one, then there are other issues potentially, but that would be true on foundations as well. So if you have any other questions related to the moving or placement or the process, I can also answer those questions.
No more questions? Yes, hi.
Where was the house originally located? Like the cross street, exactly.
1123 Harbor Avenue Southwest, and that's at the corner of Harbor Avenue and, oh my gosh, did I forget? Southwest Maryland Place. Maryland Place. And if you just drive a mile up the road, you'll see the hole where the stone cottage basement was. And
if you all scan this QR code, it actually takes you to the Walking in Eva's Shoes that Debbie were talking about earlier, and it has the exact addresses of the route, including the exact address of the cottage. And I put together a Google map of sorts that hopefully is helpful to you all. I'll email this as well, but it'll just be on the table if you want to scan it.
Yeah.
It's across from the boat launch.
Across the street from the boat launch. But yeah, there's, it's all pretty much built up, and then there's this hole, and you're like, wow, what's going to go there? It's going to be a 7-story condominium. Yes?
Have Eva's daughter's oral history been recorded so we lose the story of how it built?
Did everyone here has the family's oral histories been obtained? Yeah, we've been communicating with them and taping them as we're able, and actually Carmesita came out. She was 90 by then. She came out the night of the move, and she sat right in front and watched that building that she'd helped, clad, if you will, and lived in and loved in. She watched it be pulled off the site and down the street. She was very excited, and so she was. If you take a look at any of the stories, the news stories, she was interviewed a couple times too, so kind of neat. But yes, we are keeping in touch with the family and interviewing them as much as we can, and they're all pretty swell people. Lots of good stories there too. Other questions? I think people probably want to go touch a stone. We have some different pieces that are not swag, but you can see here and there, and when you go inside the fence, we'll have different pieces of the stone. These did not fall during the move. We picked up every piece of stone and brick that had been walkway well before the move. Different parts of the building were torn off by the family, like the porch, and so all those pieces were there, and now they're underneath the house. So you can take a look at it and feel history right in your hands.
That reminds me of another Eva story. And we didn't actually find this picture until a little while later. I'm sure Clay knew of it because but we started to save the structure, and maybe 6 months later we found this photograph in a book at the Log House Museum, which is the Historical Society, and on the top of the structure was a scallop. And so it was a serpentine scallop that went all the way around the perimeter. And I asked Carmesita because no other photographs show that. I said, what happened to the scallop on the top? And she said, oh, my mom got up there and knocked it off one day because she was afraid it was going to fall over on someone. So, you know, I doubt we will reproduce that, but you will see photographs of the original porch, and we will reproduce that when we restore the structure.
Any other questions? Should we let people go touch a house? All right. Hey, thank you everybody for coming. It is so wonderful to have you here and to share the story of the stone cottage with you. Thank you, thank you.
Oh yeah.